you know as the head coach what's happening behind the scenes.
I also think that the alignment from the top has to be good if you want sustained success.
If you're buying Declan Rice and Harry Kane, I think you've got less argument.
I think about the era of Roman Abramovich.
Can I ask you about your relationship with the people that appointed you then, the owners?
Pretty quickly, I think you're written off quite quickly.
How quickly do you think you were?
Well, fairly quickly, if I'm being honest. But again, I understand why, because I think the context was Chelsea aren't winning. It must be the coach.
But you did start winning. I mean, you had a great start.
Yeah, good job. Otherwise, they'd have lasted even shorter.
So when do you? I think you spoke at one point about it felt like the walls were closing in. It felt like a crisis, right?
Well, I think what it was just that when you're going through all that, you know as the head coach what's happening behind the scenes. Yeah. So the challenge is, how do you communicate this? How do you stay logical? How do you try to explain the challenges that you have without it sounding like it's excuses and you're weak? You know, and that's the reality. I said at the time, I think Chelsea was the hardest job in football. It's not that I couldn't do it, but I think it was at that time. And obviously, it's easy for me to say that, and it's a bit of a cheap thing to say because I don't know the other context. I'm not for 1 second thinking that. But the feeling I had with all the history of Chelsea, with all that was going on in terms of the change, with the change, if you change 20, 30 players in 2 or 3 windows, the instability of that is hard to deal with.
And then you've explain that for us, for people that don't understand. Like most people will go, 20, 30 world-class players came in. Wonderful. You've got amazing talents at your disposal, but yet you're saying it's like so difficult to deal with. What are the specifics of why that's so hard?
Well, you have to go back from before I got there. You know, Thomas is obviously he's a fantastic football coach, but they'd lost to Arsenal in pre-season, they'd lost to Leeds, they'd lost to Southampton, they lost to Zagreb. So the team was it was in a moment of growing. I think probably 6 players had come in, 6 players had left. You know, already there's a turnover of players. You just need to stabilise a little bit. And then we went into the 14 matches in 6 weeks prior to a World Cup, which is pretty unique. We lost. Well, Kante was already injured before we were there. Reece got injured. Chile got injured. And all of a sudden, the wing backs at Chelsea, which had been quite a bit part of their attacking game, they'd gone. We lost Fofana, who came in as a replacement for the ones that you lost, and all of a sudden things were just being a little bit unstable. And then the January was about, okay, the owners felt that they wanted to invest again in the team, and you know, big amounts. And I think as a coach and someone that's been in football a long time, I'm thinking in January to do that, it's not as straightforward that they're going to come in and hit the ground running and get success. Because you're buying young players, you're buying players from outside the Premier League, maybe players that are coming on a mid-season break, so they need to get up to speed. The likes of Mudryk, the likes of Fernandes, the likes of Badashili, these are young guys that haven't been successful in the Premier League. If you're buying Declan Rice and Harry Kane, I think you've got less argument because everyone knows what they do. They're Premier League ready and they can go into the team and you can win. But the problem when you're spending that sort of money, especially at Chelsea, that there's a demand that they have to win. You have to win at Chelsea.
Can I ask you about your relationship with the people that appointed you then, the owners? Like, what was it like when they first approached you for the role, and how did the relationship change during the period you were there?
I'd like to think I've still got a decent relationship with them. They're smart guys. They're ambitious. They want the right thing for Chelsea. So I don't think for 1 second they're doing anything because they want to ruin my football career. It's just football happens and these things happen. Yeah. I said it's a combination of a lot of noise around, and they sometimes have to act. They were new to it all. You know, I can only imagine. But when I spoke with Tony Bloom, you know, he's a chairman of 10 years, and he would say, you know, I look back at the start of my time, I made lots of mistakes, like we all do when we're starting out doing something. You make mistakes. You're learning. It's not until you get under the bonnet of a football club that you realise, okay, what do I need to do here? And you go down one strategy, you go down one way, and then all of a sudden that doesn't feel right, and you go down another way, and you try and have to, work it out. So, like I said, the initial conversation was about building a culture, building an environment, creating pathways for younger players through the academy, because in the past Chelsea had sold a lot of players on from the academy, and they wanted to use them in the first team. To have 16 players, 16 top players competing on the pitch, supplemented with young players, so that there's a possibility to sell, but at the same time, compete and win. So it all sounded, really positive, and it sort of made sense. And I think because because their ambition was so strong, they wanted to make some decisions themselves around recruitment. But at the end of the day, you're the owner, you're the guy that's responsible for the football club. If you want to do this, then my job is to support it. So I tried, like I said, I tried to do that with the owners, had the conversation around, look, if you do spend this money, you might have to overpay. There's no guarantees it's going to improve because of the profile of the players you're going to buy, and you might have to get some players out. They didn't do that, and they did what they did, and the consequences are we didn't win enough. And once you don't win enough, they have to make a decision. I've always said as a head coach, if the owners think that the problem is you, the results aren't good enough, and the solution is you need to change the head coach, then that's their prerogative, and you have to accept that.
Look, we all know the struggle of deciding what to eat, but what if I told you that Huel can make that decision easier? Their taster bundle has got 8 ready-to-drink bottles, including their black edition, which has got 35 grams of protein, 6 daily A to Z vitamins, 8 complete nutrition bars, 2 hot savoury pots, and a free Huel t-shirt. All you have to do is click the link in the description to unlock your offer now at huel.com/highperformance.
You have to have timing, which means lots of things: talent, recruitment, and the main thing I've felt is an alignment when you're working in team sport and at a club and a corporation, whatever it is. There has to be an alignment in terms of the idea. And that's something that I think is a huge thing. Now, not everybody has to think exactly the same, but you have to have a vision and a target you want to get to and a basic idea of how you get there. And I think if those things aren't aligned in team sport, I think it's probably hard to get there. And I think got some pretty good examples in the Premier League straight away when you look at the evolution of Liverpool and Manchester City. Liverpool had a lot of years without winning anything, and it seems like that at some point, somewhere it happened, and probably Jurgen Klopp is a huge part of it, but where things changed and aligned and worked in a direction, and we see the results. And Manchester City, I was lucky enough to have a year there, and even though it was before their sort of dominations happened with Pep Guardiola, you smelt the building. It was an alignment of this is where we're going to get to, and it doesn't matter that we came, the year I was there, we came second and probably fell below expectations for a club. You could see it's no surprise to me that I left, because from owner, chairman, sporting director, whatever, all the way down through, there was something about the place that was going in one place. So I think that's a really interesting thing.
Let's delve deeper then into alignment and how you get it, why it's not there, how you can... I assume what you're saying is there wasn't an alignment at Chelsea, culturally, between you and them?
Yeah, possibly, and I'm not taking away my responsibility, because I think you've got to be able to deal with it, whatever it is, because that's success, and success is relative. So there are things that probably I went in, and again, it fascinates me when I listen to yourselves and you're talking about non-negotiables, negotiables. We spoke about it when we spoke before, and my thing was you have to be able to kind of move on them. It's not possible in the workplace to have these red lines everywhere, and so I'm not asking for that. And if you understand quickly that there are some things that are not so important in the bigger picture for this club, they want results. You maybe have to sort of take your eye away from this perfect image you had of, I'm going in here, I'm going to change, our philosophy. I'm going to change the culture. I'm going to change that department because I think that's short. Sometimes I think in the big scheme, to have that lovely little podcast when you won everything in an hour of chat, there's a lot there before, which is, and probably more experienced coaches than myself, or people probably go, yeah, because of that, you shouldn't have come in and focused so much on that. Maybe you could have done that. So I'm taking responsibility as well, but I still, in that sort of search to not be, to not completely take responsibility or give responsibility away, I kind of think, I came away from Chelsea thinking there were some things I was right in my thoughts and how I wanted it to be, and there's some things maybe I go, yeah, but I should have dealt with it slightly differently. To get to the goal, to get to my goals, which at Chelsea were in year one to do what we did. I think that was success. In the second year, it didn't happen, and things ended. And then I start reflecting on a few things I thought could I have done a bit better there. But I also think that the alignment from the top has to be good if you want sustained success. If you're talking about performance over a period of time.
Well, that's an interesting thing, Frank, because I often think that it's an area that doesn't get spoken about. I think what you're touching on doesn't get spoken about enough, that when you see a manager fail, that often it'll be a cultural failure because they've come in talking one type of culture and the reality is it's another. So, I mean, there's some fascinating research on this by a couple of guys from Stanford University that they said traditionally you put a group of people together, you'll get one of 5 types of culture. So what Chelsea looks like from the outside looking in is one of those types is an autocratic culture where it was dominated for a long period by one individual, in this case Abramovich. So I don't know if you remember when Carlo Ancelotti spoke about thunderbolt defeats that came out of the blue would often create a huge amount of uncertainty whether the owner was upset. You can have a star culture where you go after recruiting like big name players, bringing them in and everything's done to service and keep them happy. And then you talk about a bureaucratic culture, lots of rules and regulations where you have some managers come in laying the law down. An engineering culture is where you just prize technical ability over anyone else. So you might go, he's a bit of a dick, but actually he's a good left back or whatever. But what you were coming in and talking about on our last interview was the 5th type, which was a commitment culture, which is where alignment happens, where everybody's bought into a really clear sense of purpose. This is what we're here for. And a really clear set of behaviours of this is how we're going about doing it. So when I listened back to the interview, I was thinking you were talking a different language to maybe what the owner was talking or what other people was. So I often find it interesting that when it doesn't work, it's often if you view it through a cultural lens, it makes sense why it doesn't work. You know, like if you bring in, the example we talk about is take somewhere like Manchester United in the years since Ferguson have been in. They've gone after autocratic managers. They've had superstars, players. They've had bureaucratic principles of signing. So a lot of the time you see them fighting each other rather than focused on delivering on the field.
It's so interesting because when I say it, and I'm quite quick to sort of say this is not talking about necessarily I'm very reflective across the board, and Chelsea's a club very close to my heart. So I think about the era of Roman Abramovich and since I joined. So I'm not talking about my time and, Chelsea didn't align with me. They should have done, and then it would have been perfect. It's not that case because I think when I talk about consistency, you probably look at a period of time and go, did Chelsea succeed? Yes, they did because they've won a lot. But has there been a consistent level probably over the last 10 years in terms of what you would expect in delivery? You could probably question it in terms of what Manchester City and now Liverpool have both attained. So I think those things are really important to look at. And I'd stress not to, when you talk about Roman Abramovich, I think it became slightly different because he wasn't. He's not on the ground running the club, and I think like when you have people that are overseeing this place, Finch Farm, our training ground, and Goodison Park, and everything that happens every day. If you have someone driving that and it aligns underneath that, then that's great. But sometimes I think with Chelsea, it moved away from that. The owner's the owner, and you have complete respect for that, obviously, and he did amazing things for Chelsea on a footballing level. But it's more making sure then you have the idea of what's the connections down the line. So it's fine. Any person can own a football club and not be around. That's absolutely their prerogative. It doesn't mean that they don't care. It can be the opposite. But then, okay, well, where do they delegate down? What do they delegate down? And then where do they delegate down to my job, which is coach the team, get results, or the worst can happen, or you get success.